This is RedYume and Alun doing BJD Addicts prompt number 35, Recasts. If you watched prompt number 2 or number 21 or both, you'll notice still the same wig, still the same clothes, still the same doll, still the same everything, because we're still on the same night. But I really wanted to get some knocked out while I had the time, so here we go. Recasts. I'm not here to be political or judgmental, which for people that know me, they know that's a little bit anomalous. I'm usually extremely judgmental, extremely opinionated, and very politically polarized. But I've decided to take a step back from that and try and not be a bitch. That being said, I don't generally open my mouth without having all the information, or at least as much of the information as I can get before I do draw a conclusion and make a judgment. Because I think if you are going to judge someone or something or an act, you need to be as educated as you possibly can about it. Otherwise, you run the risk of just looking really foolish. So that said, recasts. I'm not going to say whether they're right or wrong, or whether people should or shouldn't buy them. But what I am going to say is that they make me sad. Not the dolls themselves, but the whole situation. It makes me really sad. And I come to this sadness as an artist. Specifically, I'm a seamstress and I'm a cosplay model, and so, you know, I'm very protective of the things that I make. I'm very protective of the work of my photographers because I feel they work really hard to do the things that they do, and I work very, very hard to produce these costumes. So I approach this as an artist and not as a consumer. I think how would it make me feel if, you know, the photographs that I've put up or that my photographers have put up, if somebody started making photocopies of them and then selling those photocopies for less than the prints are sold for, and how that would personally make me feel, and it would make me angry. And it would make me upset, like, you know, how dare you? You didn't spend all day at the shoot. You didn't spend hours and hours making the costume. You didn't spend all that time, you know, doing the post-production or the lighting or anything else. You dumped it in a photocopier and you made a copy. I liken it to my cosplay and to my cosplay photography because I can only approach this on a personal level and not on a company or professional level, because I'm not the doll companies. I don't know what demographics they are targeting. I don't know if recasts are actually hurting them as much as, you know, some people would say that they are. For all I know, they're sitting there going, who cares? You know, it doesn't matter to me, because we're not targeting that demographic. That's not who we're after, and those aren't the people that are going to buy our dolls anyways. I don't know that one way or the other unless I'm told. So I know some companies go after recasters, some don't. I know as a commissioner, I rely on those commissions for a large chunk of my personal income, and so if somebody else were to take my original designs, I say original designs because I do make a lot of original costumes that are not canon. If somebody were to take my original designs and start making copies of those and selling it at a deep discount, however they managed to do it, I would be upset by that. But on the same side of that coin, I also realized that my commissions, my cosplay commissions, especially canon ones, do work very heavily off of somebody else's work. So there is a bit of a gray area. That being said, I wanted to actually touch upon something. I was going through the other responses, and one response was that recasts are an economical alternative, just like knockoff handbags or shoes. But what's failed to mention is all those knockoff handbags and shoes that you see, they legally can't be an exact copy of the original. There are laws that govern that, and they have to be changed a minimum of 15% from the original design to be sold as a knockoff without having, you know, infringement issues. And that in itself is a gray area, because what constitutes 15%? Is a change in color 15%? Is the change in straps 15%? Is the size thing, how many pockets it has? You know, what the heel is made out of on a shoe? What exactly constitutes that 15%? And that is where the gray area gets a little sticky. But this is where recasts fall out of that gray area. There isn't a 15% or a 10% or a 5% difference. You're talking about a product that was made from the original product. There isn't any, you know, millimeter different size on the ears, and there isn't any, you know, change in the nose or the cheeks or the body. It's a direct copy. and therefore it doesn't fall under that knockoff handbag, knockoff shoe. It's a copy. If these recast companies were, taking notes on the original doll and then trying to resculpt and then recast from their sculpts, so the doll looks remarkably similar, I think I would actually feel a lot better about it, because it puts them back into that gray area. They had to go through the process of sculpting the doll and then casting it, rather than buying the doll and casting it, which I feel that there's a really big difference there. And I think that some people would argue with me that doesn't make it any better, but there would be differences in the sculpt. There would be differences in the face. You can't sculpt exactly two heads exactly the same or two bodies exactly the same. You can get pretty close, but you can't do it exactly alike. And at least then they would have been putting in the effort that it takes these artists to make the dolls that they make. And that puts them back into that gray area. It's no longer a copy. Now it's a rather selfishly made homage. Then it would be like a band covering a song, Same song, same lyrics, different vocals, different band. But moving right along, let's talk about the second-hand market. This is where I think they become a serious problem. It's not so much the recast companies that are selling, copies of other companies' dolls. It's the second-hand market where you have people that it looks like the real thing, it's painted like the real thing, and they try and pass it off as the real thing at prices that are reflective of it being genuine. And that's not political, and that's not, speaking up for the original artist. That's just wrong. Misrepresenting an item that you have for sale is just wrong. And if you do it unknowingly, I don't know if that's better or worse, because that means that somebody just paid the scam forward. Now you're misrepresenting something that was misrepresented to you. Are you doing it unwittingly, or are you doing it to try to get your money back out of it? This is where recasts can become a serious issue, is because, somebody pays $100 for it, and they pass it off as a doll that's worth $500, and somebody else buys it and thinks it's a good deal, and they go, oh God, I got a recast, now what? Do they just lose out on that $400? Do they try and pass it off as the real thing and get their money back and let the next person deal with it? That, I think I even have more of an issue with that than the actual recast companies, because now you're screwing over other people in your own hobby. Aside from the second-hand market, you now have these owners of recasts, whether they bought them intentionally or unintentionally, that they're afraid to show their doll. They're afraid to admit that they have a recast because, they're afraid of being ostracized, and they don't want to bring it to doll meets, and they don't want to, it's like the closet stepchild or something. It sucks. So you have people that are being penalized for owning a copy, not for making a copy, but for owning a copy, because, it goes back to, well, they shouldn't have bought it in the first place. And, well, what happens if they didn't know? What are they supposed to do? Burn it? Love it any less? I'm not sure that that's right either. And I get that this is supposed to deter people from buying recasts in the first place, but I actually think, especially in the case where, somebody didn't do a whole lot of research and got a recast accidentally, that they're kind of hurting their own cause. Because nothing breeds a counterfaction as quickly as exclusion. And it has bred this counterfaction. You have, oh, we're a recast-friendly forum, we're proud recast owners, and look how frugal we are, and look how high quality it is, it's just as good as the real thing. And they have to be loud about it, because if they're not going to be shunned into the corner, as some people would have them, then they can't just exist like the rest of the doll owners. No, because recasts are evil and recasts are bad, and so now, rather than being just another member of the hobby, now they have to be outspoken because they feel they have to protect themselves from this bullying that they're receiving. And it makes people defend their purchasing choices. Now it's not just, yeah, it's a recast, or I got a recast, or I accidentally got a recast. Now it's like, no, it was a limited edition and that makes it okay, or they didn't come in that skin tone, so that makes it okay, or I really want to mod it, and that makes it okay. It's actually better because now I spent less money, and if I break it, then it's not a big deal. And making people justify their choices, especially with something like purchases, it kind of, again, it breeds animosity, and it it breeds this counterpoint to the hobby as a whole, and so now you have two very separate groups of people. And with that comes the need to bring more people to their side. You have people that are anti-recast, and they're trying to, tell the masses why recasts are bad. And then you have the people that are pro-recast, and they're like, come join us. We spend less money. We do this. We do that. We're awesome too. Our dolls are awesome too. Here's how you can buy a recast. And if people weren't so excluded, they probably wouldn't feel the need to be quite so vocal. Number one. And it might actually be better for the secondhand market because there wouldn't be this stigma about trying to sell a recast. It would be like, yeah, it's a recast. Here it is. Nice bold print. I got it from here. Then people might be able to be a little more honest about what they have and what they have for sale because there isn't this stigma attached to it. So then the question becomes, should they be taking pictures of the recast and bringing them to doll meets? Because as I said, there's now two really polarized factions here. And I think that yes, they should. They should be able to take pictures of their recast. They should be able to take them to doll meets. And I don't think it's going to ruin the hobby. I don't think it's going to promote more recast sales. I really don't. I think that people usually make their decision long before it comes down to seeing one in person, whether or not they're going to buy a legit doll or whether they're going to buy a recast. If anything, I think it's going to help minimize scams. Because if you can put a legitimate whatever next to a recast, it'll be a lot easier to see the differences, much more easily than you might perhaps on the internet. And it's not, you're sitting there going over every bit and piece of someone else's doll so you don't end up with a recast, but it will just be easier to see the difference and to, if you aren't into buying a recast, to avoid buying one. Another way I think it will help minimize scams is that if somebody has a doll that they love and that they're enjoying, they're a lot less likely to sell it. I'd be much more likely to sell something that I can't take out and play with and I can't take out and take pictures of and I can't show off. Because why do I have it? I can't enjoy it, so now I want to get rid of it. And that just starts the whole process of, do you label it as a recast? Do you pay the scam forward? What exactly do you do? Because now you've got this thing that you're not enjoying that you want to get rid of. I don't think people should have to be afraid of being cut off from their hobby for buying a recast. And I also don't think that they should have a need to beat their chest over it either. I don't think either way is really healthy, and I don't think that it helps the hobby as a whole, to be honest. In the end, we are one community, and we're not a terribly large community. The BJD hobby isn't gigantic. I think by having a more inclusive attitude in general throughout the community, we can have people make the right decisions for them and, also understand the implications of the decisions that they do make when they buy a doll. And they might even find a new appreciation for the original companies that made the sculpt to begin with, and maybe their opinions can be changed. I know if somebody's going to be hostile towards me, it doesn't matter if what they're saying is right. I'm really not terribly apt to listen because they've already made a judgment call on me and they've already made a judgment call on my decisions. And that being the case, is that kind of shuts me down, and I would be looking for other people with a like mindset. And that's where we've ended up. That's why we have these polarized factions, and I think that honestly it's not healthy for anybody. I guess that's really all I had to say about it. I wanted to avoid being as preachy as possible and maybe, I don't know, bring some fresh light to the subject that's been beaten to death over and over again. So, yeah, that's it. BJD Addicts prompt number 35, Recasts, RedYume, and Loon, signing off.